This is the Redmi Note 9S, and it's one of the best affordable mid-range phones right now. It has been my daily driver for nearly 2 weeks, and there are a few things that I want to share before you pull the trigger on this one. The Redmi Note 9S is available in 3 colors, namely Aurora Blue, Glacier White, and the Interstellar Gray that I have here. I have to say that this gray color looks a lot more blue in person. There's a specific angle when it shines in gray, but most of the time, the very glossy back finish shines in blue. Speaking of glossy, this finish reminds me of the HTC U11 Ultra. It is sparkly than most glass phones and collects fingerprints like there's no tomorrow. And if you lay this phone on a smooth surface, it will slide away from its place. At 6.67 inches, the Redmi Note 9S is a large phone with a large display. While I can still shimmy my way around the phone with one hand, I wouldn't risk dropping it. There's a fingerprint scanner on the right hand side that doubles as a power button. It's an accurate and very speedy scanner, but its position is too high for my average sized hands. And don't get me started with that volume rocker. Xiaomi should have moved it to the other side. Xiaomi still includes an IR blaster on the top, but they also still include a south-firing speaker that's easily muffled by hands. Quality-wise, both the max volume and bass could be better. Luckily, there's a headphone jack if you want better sound quality. And before I forget, there's a teeny LED indicator in the earpiece. It's so small that you actually have to look for it. If you want to test it out, just charge your phone. Splash proofing, which is present here, is becoming a standard on mid-range phones, and that's very much appreciated. And before we end the design discussion, we can't forget about that camera hump. Having it in the middle helps in minimizing table wobbles, but then again, it still wobbles. If you want to get rid of the hump, I highly recommend using the included case in a box. It also makes the phone easier to handle. Overall, I think the Redmi Note 9S looks good. I just personally think that it should be smaller. Moving over to the display, the IPS LCD is crisp thanks to the 1080p screen. While it's not as punchy as AMOLED, I like how colors are well saturated and closer to real life. I also find the panel to be sufficiently bright outdoors. Coming from the Galaxy Note 9, I find the auto brightness feature to be on the dimmer side. In the end, I turned it off and tuned the slider to maximum. And since the peak brightness can get so high, the display is HDR certified. It means you can watch videos on Netflix and YouTube with better dynamic range. Like the Galaxy Note 10, there's a hole punch at the top center of the display. Xiaomi calls it dot display, and the dot didn't bother me at all. What bothered me is the double tap to wake function. Apparently, it only works on the lock screen and not the main screen. Other than that, I really like the display of the Redmi Note 9S. And for a video junkie like myself, I appreciate the inclusion of HDR. If there's only one feature to make this the perfect mid-range display, that's at least 90Hz refresh rate. Now for the performance. The Redmi Note 9S comes in 2 models, and the one that I have here is the base model with 4GB RAM and 64GB storage. I've tested tons of games, and for the most part, the Snapdragon 720G can hold its own. Except for one game, Ark Survival. The first-person survival game consistently crashed on me whenever it's rendering intensive graphics. I'm not sure why, but my guess is that 4GB RAM isn't enough for open-world games. If you want more gaming tests, you can check out my separate video for that. Since the first day, I've gotten at least 3 software updates already. But even with the consistent updates, Xiaomi MIUI still needs a bit of polishing. There are occasional stutters when navigating around the home screen, and the built-in Google Discover on the left side is very laggy. Luckily, I found a widget that does the same thing with one tap, so I disabled the Discover page. If you're going to ask me, I like using gestures over navigation buttons. However, the inconsistent gesture animations force me to switch back to on-screen buttons. But all in all, MIUI is not a terrible experience. While I expected ads to be popping out of nowhere, I'm glad that they only appear within Xiaomi's built-in apps. The Redmi Note 9S can easily last a year of use, but you have to get the 6GB model if you want a lasting experience. One thing that I really love about this phone is the 5020 mAh battery. I can comfortably get 7 to 8 hours of screen time with a bit of gaming on the side. I can even play games for 6 hours straight. While I do think that this is a solid one-day battery phone, I feel like it could be better. Maybe because I'm always stuck at home, but I think I should be getting at least an hour more of screen time. Charging time won't be a nightmare here thanks to the 18 watts fast charging, but for some reason, Xiaomi is bundling a 22.5 watt charging brick, which you won't be able to utilize unless you jump your purchase to the Redmi Note 9 Pro Max. Regardless, it only takes an hour and 45 minutes to fill this phone. By far, we've had good design, excellent performance, and great battery. But what about the cameras? For starters, this phone has a 48 megapixel main sensor alongside an 8 megapixel ultra-wide lens, 5 megapixel macro lens, and 2 megapixel depth lens. Overall, it's an okay camera, but this isn't the phone to get if you want the best cameras in this price range. As expected, the dynamic range is a bit limited as shadows get crushed a lot. I did notice that white balance changes drastically, especially when shooting with the 16 megapixel selfie camera. Photos come out soft sometimes even with great lighting, however the full 48 megapixel mode easily fixes that. But then here's another problem. The camera app crashes. It happens when the phone is taking its time processing the photos. The app would become unresponsive and crash, but fortunately it still saves whatever you were capturing. There seems to be a problem too when it comes to the shutter speed. You would initially think it's fast, but when you review the photos, the subject is blurry and out of focus. The same goes for the ultra-wide lens. On top of that, night mode is a bit out of whack. It works, but it lifts the shadows too much, the photos end up looking washed out. If there's something that I did not expect, it's the macro lens. I think this is the best camera out of the four. It's sharp, detailed, and consistent. When it comes to videos, you can get good 4K quality at 30 FPS max, but you can only take advantage of the stabilization when shooting at 1080p. Again, Xiaomi needs to work on its software. I'm not expecting the best updates, but at least make the shooting experience reliable. All said, should you buy the Redmi Note 9s? Yes, but you might want to wait a little bit. In a few days, Realme 6 will be released and that one comes with faster display and a 64 megapixel camera. I think Realme 6 will be able to provide a better experience if it will arrive for the right price. But if not, make sure to purchase the Redmi Note 9s with 6GB of RAM and 128GB storage that costs 11,990 pesos. And that's it for the Redmi Note 9s review. Until the next video, stay safe.